As I looked around the restaurant for the person I was supposed to meet, I saw my ex-wife, Susan, with a slightly overweight middle-aged man. He looked like he used to be in good shape, but now he seemed to have enjoyed life a little too much. Susan seemed very happy sitting next to him. Everything about the man seemed to indicate that he had money. Memories of our past came flooding back as I stood in the doorway. Even though it had been 3 years since we got divorced, the feelings were still fresh as if it had happened yesterday. So instead of being with her, I found myself watching from a distance. But in the end, she seemed happy with how things turned out. My problem started when I went to Albany for a meeting with a client. I decided to stay overnight to avoid a long drive back. However, my plans were thrown into disarray when the client called just an hour into the trip to say that his car had been damaged, but he was fine. He apologized for canceling so late, and I told him it was fine and suggested we reschedule. I still wasn't ready for the extra 2 hours of driving. I had promised my wife a surprise romantic dinner. When I got home an hour and a half later, I finally turned onto my street. The first thing I noticed was 3 cars I didn't recognize parked in the driveway. Since my wife often has friends over when I'm not home, I didn't think much of it. I parked in the street and went inside, thinking everything was normal, but when I saw 4 sets of clothes scattered on the living room floor, I immediately realized something was wrong. It hit me hard. My wife's passionate cries weren't cries for help. They were requests for deeper intimacy. My heart sank as I realized the truth. My wife was being intimate with another man. Even though I didn't want to, I knew I had to face what was waiting for me upstairs. When I got to the top of the stairs, I heard my wife making loud noises and quietly looked into the bedroom. I saw 3 men. I didn't know 2 of them, but I recognized the third as her boss from work, Jeff Davis. I was shocked to see them intimate with my wife. I felt even worse about Jeff when he praised her and talked about how she helped him with his business clients. It made me sick to realize that this guy was using my wife for his own benefit. All 3 of them treated her like she was just there for their pleasure, saying disrespectful things and acting like they were in control. Seeing her behave like this, so different from the woman I knew during our 10 years of marriage, made me agree with Jeff's horrible description of her quietly retreating. I went downstairs without anyone noticing. I took refuge in my office. I grabbed my digital video camera, which surprisingly still had some battery life. There was an old vacation tape in it, and I had room to record. I wanted to document my wife's actions. For legal reasons. Not to create a scandalous show. I set up the camera by the bedroom door and took pictures of my wife's face and the other participants. I could only watch for about 510 minutes before my emotions overwhelmed me. While some might find such a scene exciting for me, it brought only sadness and a deep sense of betrayal, a feeling of utter defeat. I went back downstairs and tried to collect my thoughts in my office. I got my gun out of the safe and took the safety off as a precaution. Even though I wasn't someone who usually resorted to violence, I felt the need to protect myself in case things got out of hand. I went into the living room, grabbed the car keys and wallets from the pants scattered on the floor, and let the air out of the tires of all the cars parked outside, including Sue's car. When I got back inside, a wicked grin spread across my face as I came up with a plan. I was confident it would work if Sue had her cell phone with her. I saw it on the nightstand while I was recording, so I got my camera ready, positioned myself quietly behind the stairs, and called her. After several attempts with no answer, she finally picked up the silence in the house and told me she had warned the others to keep quiet. Sue asked out of breath, "Hey Bobby, how's Albany?" I could hear the men in the room chuckling softly. You sound tired." I pretended to be worried. "Yeah, I just had to run upstairs for a phone call," she replied quickly, pulling herself together. "My client, Cannell, so I'll be home soon. Want to grab dinner?" I asked calmly, although inside I was more anxious than ever to go home now. She asked nervously. "Sure, I just have to get ready, babe. See you soon," she said in a hurry before abruptly ending the call, leaving me with a knowing smile, knowing what was about to happen. Within a minute, as expected, 4 completely naked people came down the stairs into the living room. The men quickly got dressed, and Sue quickly got dressed as well. They all rushed out, and Sue put on her shoes and a jacket and glanced outside, hoping they would leave before her. If she hadn't been so upset, she might have noticed my car parked down the street. The men all started talking to her at the same time, so Sue stepped out onto the porch to listen. I slammed the front door and locked it behind her. My wife saw my face for a moment as I closed the door and tried to talk to me through the side window with a pleading tone in her voice, but it was too late to talk. The other men came back to my porch and banged on the front door, indicating they wanted their stuff. Realizing what they were up to, I called 911 and reported an attempted burglary. The dispatcher said a neighbor had already called. I gave my name and address and waited for the cops, who arrived quickly. Only 2 minutes later, after the cops had questioned my wife, I went up to the 2 officers and told them that my wife had been abused by the men there and asked them to arrest her. This upset the guys, and they started yelling that they were invited and that she was fine and that there was no mistreatment. Everyone, including me, looked at Sue and waited for her to say something. She avoided eye contact and admitted in a quiet voice filled with shame that she had invited the men, gotten close to them, and hadn't been abused. It was her choice. The men seemed relieved that they wouldn't be charged with abuse, and soon 2 more police cars showed up, and they took everyone's names for their report. The chief cop then talked to me and said that since my wife had invited these guys, and they were all adults, there wasn't much they could do legally. He suggested counseling or something. With a disapproving look at my wife, I told the cops to call a cab and said Mrs. Thomas couldn't come back to the house. Later that night, one of the guys called a cab after he found her tires were flat. They also tried to accuse me of taking their stuff, but I told the police they were wrong. I went back to the porch where Sue was still with them, until the taxi showed up. I stood there feeling really angry, even though I was mad, and my wife bravely came up to me. She didn't know how angry I was, or that I had a magnum, or she might have run away. "Bobby, I'm really sorry," she tried to say, but I quickly cut her off. "You broke my heart, and I won't forgive you. Jeff called you a bad name, and frankly, I think it fits. From now on, I'll call you that, and never use your real name again. If you want to talk to me, do it through Tad." With that, I went back inside and locked the door behind me, leaving them outside. She went back to the group crying, and Jeff tried to comfort her. She pushed him away, which strangely made me feel a little better, but that feeling didn't last long when I got back to my bedroom. It smelled like they had been together, which made me even angrier. I exploded, tearing up the whole room. I dragged the mattress out and threw it on the front lawn. Then I got my toolbox from the garage and took apart the bed, throwing the pieces outside as well. Back to the bedroom. I grabbed Sue's cell phone from the floor and looked through her contacts and messages. Not surprisingly, I found disgusting emails, photos, and even videos of strange men being intimate with her. Looking at the pictures, it was clear that she knew these people. I laughed bitterly at how attentive I used to be to her and realized that those days were over. I took all the boxes from our bedroom downstairs and put their contents in separate piles on the front lawn, then started getting rid of her stuff from the guest room and found something unexpected as I moved each drawer of the dresser outside, just as I had done with the bedroom stuff. The last bottom drawer was stuck, fueled by anger. I pulled hard and heard it crack. After some effort, it finally opened and I found what was blocking it: 7 or 8 DVDs hidden underneath. I accidentally cracked one of the DVD cases, but luckily the disc was fine. My heart sank again as I looked at the DVDs. I didn't think I could feel any worse, but I did. I went downstairs. I looked at the titles on the DVDs, which made me even more upset. The first DVD was of Sue with her friend Sarah at Sarah's place. Sue often helped out at Sarah's events in Avon, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It looked like they were getting intimate with different people at her house. As I watched the footage for hours, tears filled my eyes and only stopped when I saw the last 2 DVDs. The first was of Sue with her tennis instructor, a service I paid for. She had lessons every Saturday and came back later too tired for intimacy, which made sense now. The second DVD showed Sue being intimate at work, specifically in the boardroom with Jeff, her boss and Jeff's boss. Bill Evans' Bill was influential in the community, often in the news for his charity work, which I now realized extended to my wife's personal life. I grabbed a large envelope and carefully placed a cell phone, the DVDs, and a cassette tape I had recorded earlier. My plan was to give the whole envelope to my lawyer and close friend Ted Worth, who I've trusted for years. At that moment, nothing else mattered. Looking at Sue's computer on the desk, I turned it on and started copying every file, email, photo and video to external drives. It took about an hour, and then I started going through my wife's digital stuff. I found videos similar to what I saw on the DVDs. I found and came across explicit pictures that you'd normally see on adult websites. Digging deeper, I found a bunch of emails going back about 6 months, even though she tried to hide them with tricky names. I found emails between her, Jeff, and a few other guys, as well as emails with Sarah as recently as last week. I brushed off these emails until one really got to me. I thought about using my Magnum, but I knew she wasn't worth it. I had to stay strong. The email that hit me the hardest was from Sue to Sarah. Sarah wondered why Sue hadn't left me to be single again and asked Sue to describe her ideal future husband. Here's what she said. Sarah, I don't care about him anymore. Bobby is faithful but stupid. I'm afraid he's going to find out about my secret life soon. He's not completely clueless, but he's blinded by love. Lately, he's been putting on weight and his growing belly is a turnoff, and compared to other men, he's lacking. I also hate beards and mustaches. They make him look kind of gross. I used to love him very much, but the excitement of the last few years is too tempting to give up. His lawyer friend could cause problems if he gets involved. Jeff and Bill at work, hinting at promotions and perks with some suggestive references. I laugh. I also want a house and a car. If I play my cards right, I could get alimony every month plus. I'm looking forward to our Tuesday party when I'm healed from my tennis injury. Tony is amazing. Make sure I get the video from last Thursday. It was my first time with so many men at once. As for my dream man, he has to be rich, loyal, obedient, and not too smart. He has to cater to my every whim and still ask me which one I laugh at. I don't care about the bedroom, as long as there's money involved. I laugh. I can get my needs met elsewhere. Sometimes it feels too easy. Damn, Bobby's home has to go now. See you Tuesday. Call me, Sue. I read the letter over and over, feeling deeply hurt by words like disgusting. Had she really thought so little of me these past few years? Was my love so blind that she cheated on me for more than 2 years? After that, I went to bed and finally fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, after a restless night, I called in sick to work. I called my close friend and lawyer, Ted Worth. Mary, Ted's secretary, answered the phone. I'd known her almost as long as I'd known Ted. I asked for an urgent meeting, but she said he'd be in court all day. Mary, tell Ted I need to see him in his office in an hour. If he gives you a hard time, mention Tammy Brown's name. That'll get his attention. I'll see you in an hour. I told her before quickly hanging up as I got dressed. My phone rang. I was reluctant to talk to Sue. I checked the caller ID. It was an unknown number, so I answered, thinking it might be Ted calling me back. Hello, Mr. Thomas. This is Bill Evans calling from Susan's office. If possible, I'd like to talk about what happened at your house last night. Could we meet in my office today to clear things up for everyone involved? Not sure if he knew about the video of him with my wife at work. I knew he was worried about keeping Jeff Davis's important clients. My wife and Jeff were valuable to him, and he probably didn't want to lose them. He was also probably worried about bad publicity for his company and himself. Mr. Evans, I have an important meeting this morning, but I'll call you back on this number before noon to set something up for today. I told him calmly. I made it sound like he was negotiating with me. He was in for a surprise when I stepped outside. It looked like a weird garage sale. There was the broken bed, and Sue's clothes still scattered about. An elderly neighbor waved at me curiously. I knew I'd be the talk of the neighborhood. As they say on the news, this was a big deal in the inner city suburbs. I grabbed a quick bite to eat before heading straight to Ted's office. Mary made me a cup of coffee, lots of cream, no sugar. Ted and I went way back. Wow, Bobby, I don't know what you have on Tad, but I mentioned his name, and he told me to clear his schedule for the day. I could use a break. She joked. If you want to know who Tammy Brown is, she added with a laugh, you'll have to ask Ted. Hey, where is he anyway? I asked, and he said he would be right over. He had to reschedule his meeting with the judge for today's hearing. She told me he just walked into WOW. Bobby Tammy Brown. You must be in serious trouble for bringing that name up to me. Come into the office and let's talk. Mary H. Out of connecting me with anyone for now. Ted quickly said I could get my coffee, and he closed the door for privacy. I told him what had happened the night before and what I had found out about Sue's new lifestyle. Then I gave him an envelope with all the evidence I had gathered, and finally he spoke. He listened intently to my story without interrupting. I could tell that Ted was thinking about the legal side of things as he processed what had happened the night before. I also told him that Bill Evans wanted to meet today. Now, Bobby, let's focus on what's important here. I've known you a long time, and I know you're really hurt. Is there any chance that you and Sue could work things out? He asked Ted if it was Katie, your wife, and you found those videos and emails. You'd leave her in a heartbeat. I want a divorce, but I also want to fight back hard. I'm not going to sit back and take this betrayal lying down. I admitted it. Okay, first we're going to sue Tony and the tennis club. Sarah's out because she's just a friend, but Sue's workplace is fair game. Second, we're going to sue the 2 clients and their companies that were at your house. We're also going after Jeff Davis, Bill Evans, and their crew. Ted warned me that things could get worse before they get better. Ted warned me, but I don't care. I'll even get physical if I have to. I'm going to make these people pay for what they did to Sue," I said angrily. "All right, Bobby, remind me what Bill Evans wanted and we'll go from there." Ted said we looked at a few options and I liked the last one the best. A direct hit on Sue's workplace felt right. I had proof with videos of Davis Evans and Sue in her boardroom. Ted explained that they had influence over Sue in her job, but it could lead to some serious legal trouble. I thought that sounded good. Ted also hinted that once Bill Evans saw our evidence, he might change his mind and offer a settlement if it was less than $2 million. "Out of luck," I said firmly. "You know what, Ted, make it 5 million. I've seen your legal bills before," I joked. "Come over tonight at 7 o'clock. Katie's going to make us a great dinner. You could use a break from home," I said firmly. I quickly set up a meeting with Bill Evans for 2 p.m. Right after that, Mary popped her head into the office. "Ted, they're calling you on the line." "One," she told him, "Mary." I said, "No calls?" He snapped, looking annoyed. "Sorry, Ted, but it's Susan. She wants to talk to you, and I thought you might want to pick up." Mary said, "Sorry, Mary. It's going to be a long day, and it's just getting started." "Does she know that Bobby is here?" he asked. "Not that I know of, Ted," she replied. "Tell her." "I'll talk to her in a minute," he said more calmly as Mary left for the reception area. "Well, I bet she's already figured out that her phone computer and all her DVDs are gone. I bet she was really mad that I put all her stuff on the front lawn with our bed." I told him, "Wow, you had a busy evening. Let me take this call, and please don't interrupt me like you did. I need to clear some things up right now." He told me to take the call. I began to hear one side of the conversation, but I could almost guess what she was saying to Ted without hearing her words. "Hi, Susan, this is Ted." "Yes, I have already spoken to him. Bobby's a good guy and my friend. I thought you of all people would back him up instead of selling him out." "No excuses, Sue. I'm not in the mood." "Yes, I'll represent him. He has a strong case. You know this isn't going to be pleasant." "Right. I'll talk to him, but you've completely destroyed a man who was always loyal and loved you deeply. I doubt he even cares what you think. My advice to you is to find a good lawyer. You're going to need one." "Yes, Bill Evans has scheduled a meeting for 2 p.m. But I don't think you should go and listen to me. Sue, if you try to listen to the conversation outside the office door, I'm going to tell Bobby to leave and things will get worse. It's best to wait and be quiet today. I know he put your stuff out on the lawn, but just like you can invite people into your bedroom, he can take your stuff out of the house. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't get violent last night. Yes, he had a gun, but it was for protection. Remember, he thought you were in danger. That's in the police report. I can't say for sure, but if it was my wife, Katie, I might be in jail right now. I think he acted out of anger, given the situation. As for your computer, phone, and anything else that's missing, you'll have to talk to the co-owner of the house. Maybe he left it on the lawn with your clothes and someone took it. I've done all the paperwork for the house, and you both have the same rights. It's up to each of you how you want to use those rights." Ted said he'd tell him right away and sternly warned Sue to stay where she was and let Bobby stay in the house until things were sorted out because it wasn't safe for her to be there with him right now. He then told Sue not to push him and admitted that he was tempted to punch her in the nose. He told her to stay with Sarah, said he'd be in touch, and asked her lawyer to contact him as soon as they were hired. A tear wouldn't soften Ted's stance. Now he was not only Bobby's legal advisor, but also his friend. He made it clear that her tears wouldn't sway him, and that he could be tough when needed, which seemed to be one of those times. He regretted that she would see a side of him usually reserved for his enemies, and warned her that she wouldn't like it. Ted ended by telling Sue to stay away from Bobby and to stay in her office for now, as he wanted nothing to do with her. Looking at me, Ted asked if I had heard most of the conversation, sounding a bit sad. I admitted to my friend that I had heard most of it, saying that I wanted to confront her in person and tell her how I really felt, but I confessed that I wasn't ready to face her again, at least not yet. "I have a couple of things I need from you, Bobby," he said, suddenly shifting to a more positive and hopeful tone. "First, give me those tapes." Ted gestured for me to take the videotapes out of the envelope, the ones from last night, the ones with Tony at the tennis club, and the footage of Sue with Mr. Davis and Mr. Evans in her office. After I handed him the tapes, he told me to invite Mary over for lunch. I looked confused, and he quickly shot me a confused look back. "I think it's better if I watch them myself to spare you any more grief before our meeting at 2 p.m. Plus, I don't think looking at those things would do you any good right now. I don't want you upset before we meet with Bill Evans." I agreed with his advice and thanked him before sharing the good news with Mary. She joked that I should take her to a fancy restaurant if Ted would pick up the tab. We both laughed and left. Mary was a great companion at dinner, and for the next hour, she helped take my mind off things. When we got back, we heard Ted cheering as we walked into the office. He was in a great mood and did a little victory dance at his desk. These shots change everything. "Bobby, it's unbelievable," he said excitedly. My expression became mixed, and I think he finally understood why. "Oh, Bobby, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize how important those tapes were. I know that what Sue did really hurt you." I was just thrilled to find out that he apologized. "Sincerely, Bobby, come here. I want you to see something." Ted called me over, and I walked behind him to look at his screen. "Did you see the whole video of Tony at the tennis club with Sue?" he asked. "No, I only saw part of it last night." It was hard to watch without feeling angry or worse. I admitted, honestly, get ready for it near the end. Right after Tony and Sue finish, they draw a small crowd into the men's locker room. Yes, the tennis club locker room. I hate to say it, but she let the other guys who were watching join in after Tony. I'm not telling you this to upset you, but to show you this guy right here. The guy he was pointing at was an older man wrapped in a towel with long gray hair and a big mustache. He asked me if I recognized him. Ted played the video, and I saw him drop the towel and show off a big package. Any guy would brag about that. The problem was that he went right up to my wife and got close to her. The next thing I knew, she was surrounded by 5 more guys waiting their turn. I told Ted, "I have no idea who this guy is, but I guess you do." I replied, trying to stay calm, "Bobby, this is ammunition for our meeting today at the tennis club at 16 Nassau." He told me excitedly and explained his plan. I grinned when I heard this. In addition to being my friend, Ted was an amazing lawyer. I was happy to have him on my side this time. We left his office and headed downtown with a portable DVD player, some printed photos, and legal envelopes. When we arrived at Sue's building, we went to Bill Evans' office on the top floor, with Sue's office 1 floor below. After waiting in the reception area, we were finally ushered into Mr. Evans' fancy office. Just before we went in, I felt someone watching me from the hallway. I looked over and saw a woman just before she disappeared around the corner. Guess who? I thought I was lucky I didn't have to deal with her today. We walked into Bill's office, which was filled with fancy furniture and decorated with plaques, awards, and photos of him with important people. I wondered if he ever brought Sue here. I felt even more dislike for Mr. Evans than before. I introduced Ted and took over the conversation. Hi, Mr. Evans. This is my friend Tedworth, and he's here for the meeting you set up today, I said to Bill as we shook hands. Mr. Thomas, Bob, I thought this was supposed to be a private meeting between you and me. Mr. Evans said, Well, I decided to bring Ted along. Anything you have to say to me, you can say to him, I said firmly, no discussion. He accepted that Ted was there and spoke to me, ignoring me. Ted smiled at that. I knew what was coming next, but let Mr. Evans speak first before we surprised him. Bob, can I call you Bob? Bill asked. Sure, no problem. Actually, I thought it would be good to have Jeff Davis here as well. This concerns him as well, I told Mr. Evans after a short pause, and he pressed the intercom button. Julie, tell Jeff to come to my office right away. It's urgent, got it. Jeff will be here soon while we wait for Jeff. I want to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience Jeff and Sue caused. I know last night was rough, but if we work together, maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. Bill said optimistically. What exactly do you mean by that, Mr. Evans? I asked, waiting for Jeff to arrive. Your wife means a lot to me. Sue. Bill began, but Jeff walked in and interrupted him. He looked like he was going to leave, but Bill told him to stay. Jeff reluctantly sat down and avoided looking at me. Bob, I just want to say that I care a lot about Sue, almost like she's my daughter. He started, but Ted cut him off. Are you saying you have a thing for inbreeding, Mr. Evans? Ted asked, surprising him. I chuckled softly, understanding Ted's point. What are you trying to say? Do I have a weird thing for inbreeding? What does that even mean? He replied, sounding offended. Let me show you what they say. A picture is worth 1,000 words, Ted said, placing the DVD player on Bill's desk. These are screenshots of the video you are about to see. He handed them to Jeff, not Bill. Jeff's eyes widened as he slowly handed them to Bill. The pictures clearly showed Bill and Jeff with my wife, leaving no doubt as to who they were or what they were doing. I even suspected that Bill recognized his own boardroom table where he and Sue had their encounters. Jeff, are you seriously saying that you videotaped this and shared copies? Bill asked, almost speechless. Jeff seemed unable to answer and looked completely stunned. Well, Mr. Evans, here's what's going to happen. Just to be clear, I'm Bobby's attorney and friend, so let me explain what we expect and how we expect you to handle this. Tad said, savoring the moment. First, Sue keeps her job, no questions asked. Bobby thinks she'll need it, and she seems to fit in well here, he told Bill, giving him a subtle wink. Second, Mr. Davis is out of the picture. Sue stays and he goes, Tad said, gesturing to a shocked Jeff. Third, we expect you to make us a fair financial offer. We'll review your initial proposal and give you a yes or no within 5 business days. If necessary, we'll begin legal proceedings in 2 months, maybe less. Tad said, starting the video before they could interrupt, turned the screen for Bill to see it, showed both men with my wife in their boardroom repeatedly. Jeff didn't have to watch, given his role in recording it. Bill just stared with his mouth open. I could tell he was thinking hard about how to save his business, his reputation, his family, and his money. I knew he had to act fast. Jeff, after these guys leave, we need to talk about your job here. I'll talk to my lawyer about a deal that might satisfy both of you, knowing what could happen if this gets out. Bill said, thinking aloud. Don't worry, Mr. Evans, we'll keep your secret until we get a real offer from you. But don't fire Mr. D just yet. He may have other copies of the video that give him power. If we don't handle this properly, you could both be in legal trouble for interfering with an employee, and that would affect your jobs. Tad warned them as we got up to leave. Tad took back the DVD player and the pictures we had brought. We left just as Bill and Jeff looked ready to talk privately. I had a question for Tad, but he motioned for us to wait until we were outside. I hadn't noticed Sue trying to eavesdrop around the corner, but the last thing I heard from Tad was Mr. Evans telling Julie to bring Sue Thomas to him immediately over the intercom. I smiled in anticipation of what would happen next. Bill would soon find out that I had found his DVD in our house once we were outside. I asked why he gave Jeff a way out by suggesting he use his own video against Bill. It's all about divide and conquer. Ted explained that it's better if they're not on the same team, but each looking out for himself. That way, if Bill doesn't offer enough, we can play them against each other. Tad also wisely pointed out that Jeff and Bill have families and go to church. Despite what the videos showed, they're not ready to shake things up at home. As I left the building, I realized that it would now be remembered as the place where my wife betrayed me, not where she worked. It made me sad to think that Ted's words had brought me back to reality. Sure, let's get a beer before we go to the tennis club. At 4 p.m. We could both use a drink, and I have something on my mind that I want to talk to you about, although I'm not sure yet what it is that Ted said. As we drove to the tennis club, we pulled into a cozy bar restaurant next to the tennis club, and Ted ordered 2 beers before beginning the conversation. Bobby, I think Bill Evans is going to make an offer, probably just shy of $1 million. I know his legal team from another case, and they're sharp. He's also practical. Tomorrow, I'll give him a call and let him know that a low offer won't go down well for his client's business or personal life. I'll suggest around $3 million or advise we walk away from the table Ted shared. Also, I need to know if, in case the offer's turned down, you're okay with me painting Susan in a bad light. I'm not going to stop doing my job as your lawyer, which is to do whatever it takes to win in court, even if it means making them look bad. It may get messy and all over the news. I'll use every legal trick in the book to win our case, but keep in mind that some uncomfortable truths about Sue, your marriage, and even your personal life may come out. Have you thought about that? Ted asked, dropping this bombshell at the last minute. I told Ted that I had thought deeply about it, and that I believed I had more integrity than they assumed. I mentioned that I was prepared to proceed if necessary, but that I preferred to start by considering the financial offer route, and hinted at this. Ted agreed and suggested we start with Bill's offer. He assured me that if it wasn't up to par, he would take care of all the necessary paperwork immediately. He also mentioned using his connections with newspapers and local news stations. They could get footage or pictures, even if they had to censor the explicit parts with blue bars, like they do on TV shows. Ted, you've always been there for me, and I trust your judgment. I just wish none of this mess had happened. Being a clueless husband was easier than being publicly embarrassed by a cheating wife. But you have my approval to do whatever is necessary. I didn't start this mess, but I'm determined to end it soon, I said, feeling frustrated. I get it, Bobby. No problem. Now let's talk about our next meeting. This guy, Mr. Harry Riel, owns the tennis club. You remember him from the video in my office. He seems to be taking a hands-off approach, saying that the adults will do what they do and he won't interfere. He might even let Tony's tennis coach go temporarily for appearances, but then rehire him later. Tony is quite popular at the club, especially with the ladies, and remember Bobby, while most of the dues are paid by men, women are also important members. This will be crucial in how you deal with Mr. Riel. Ted informed me of the situation. It was clear that Mr. Riel and Thad didn't get along. They were hostile from the start. Mr. Riel bluntly signaled the end of the meeting. Mr. Riel met Bob Thomas. He said, nodding to me. His wife is a member here. We found out that Tony Simba, your tennis coach, was having an affair with Mr. Thomas's wife. We want to know what you're going to do about it. Tad explained that he was waiting for Riel's answer, but I knew he'd take care of it himself and tell Thad to leave. In a few words. Look, what adults do in private is none of my business. Harry Riel told us, and Mr. Thomas, if your wife isn't happy with you in bed, don't blame me if she looks elsewhere. There are plenty of unhappy wives in the club. Some come back for the special attention my staff gives them. If you know what I mean? Harry said, winking at me. I wanted to react, but Ted grabbed my wrist and quietly told me to stay calm and let him handle it. Harry, you're assuming this happened without the owner knowing. That's a big assumption. Ted said as he pulled out a DVD player and placed it on Harry's desk. Ted pressed play and pointed the screen at Harry. His reaction showed that he was not pleased with what he saw on the video. Before Harry could speak, Thad jumped in. Harry, you knowingly took advantage of a member of your club, and your fellow member, Mrs. Susan Thomas, whose husband pays her dues, isn't happy about it. Thad told the silent Mr. Riel that when word gets out, every guy who pays dues will wonder if his wife is doing the same thing while he's footing the bill. I'm going to have to subpoena everyone who was in the locker room that day. Married men are not going to be happy with you. Ted chimed in, almost like he was telling a story. And then, there's the whole privacy issue of filming in a locker room. Harry, when I'm done, your club won't have the same reputation and your bank account could take a hit. Ted added, trying to convince him. So here's the deal. We want a good offer from you, and we want it soon, because it could save you a lot of trouble and money. Ted finished as we watched Harry Riel mull over his decisions. Ted, you're still a real piece of work, but I can't argue with your points. I'll get back to you tomorrow with an offer. If I agree, you give me back all the tapes, and we keep this quiet, and I'll fire Tony willingly now. If that's all you legal guys came for, get out. Harry Riel dismissed us as Ted grabbed the DVD player with a grin and turned it off. Oh, and say hi to Tito Martinez, Ted said to Harry before he left the room. Go to hell. Worth was all Harry could say in response. Ted laughed all the way back to the parking lot. That was quite a ride. Now we wait for offers. Tad told me, as we went to his house for a nice homemade dinner at the end of the week, that Bill Evans had offered almost $2. $7 million to keep Sue as his employee. Jeff Davis, after giving all his tapes to Bill Evans, lost his job. Bill. They just let him go, leaving poor Jeff with few options. I went after the two guys who were with my wife the night I found her with Jeff. They turned out to be two of Jeff's big clients. They didn't want any bad press, so they each offered me $1 million to keep quiet. Harry Riel refused the offer and suggested we go to court. So he did, and he ended up losing $3 million. His club lost a lot of members, and he had to give up ownership. He probably thought he could get out of trouble, but the judge wasn't impressed with the private locker room footage or the cheating. I gave Sue a house and a car, like she wanted, and I didn't have to pay child support. I only saw her in court twice. Both times I called her a cheater, which made her cry. I often wondered why she was crying now, but didn't seem to care that she had caused me so much trouble before. Thanks to Ted's advice, I found myself with more money than I had ever imagined. The pain of that difficult year still lingers and haunts me to this day. Memories of all the trials and tribulations of that terrible time came flooding back in an instant. Lost in my thoughts. I didn't realize the restaurant manager was speaking to me until I snapped out of my flashback, asking if everything was okay. I was not sure how long I had been standing there. Lost in thought, I shook my head to clear it and returned to the present moment. Sorry about that. I just got lost thinking about an old problem. When I saw the group, I came to meet them. Thanks again. I explained to the manager, noticing the curious look he gave me, the way people look at an elderly person lost in recovery. I walked over to my ex-wife's table. Surprise was written all over her face the last time we were together. I was overweight, with long hair and a beard, nursing an old knee injury from baseball. That was my excuse at the time, but honestly, I had settled into a comfortable life with her. But things were different now. I had a shorter haircut, was fit from regular exercise, and had had my knee repaired thanks to the money from Jeff and Bill's company. My suits were fancier, and I made sure to present myself well in public, and I decided to break the silence. I spoke first. You look fantastic today. Susan almost forgot how gorgeous you can be, I remarked, deliberately trying to get a reaction out of her. I knew just how to push her buttons. My name is Susan Bobby. Why can't you call me by my name? She snapped back, clearly irritated. I didn't call you that, bitch. You know who did? I just think it suits you, remember? I warned you 3 years ago that you broke my heart, and I'll always remember you by that name. I clarified as the man sitting next to her started to protest and get up, but Sue motioned for him to stay calm. Tears welled up in her eyes, smearing her makeup. Her boyfriend interrupted. Go freshen up, Sue, and fix your face. I'll take care of this jerk for you. She stood up and locked eyes with me as I returned a single glance, perhaps revealing the pain I'd been carrying for 3 years. Her tears flowed even harder, surprising me that she still had any feelings for me. Or maybe it was lingering guilt, probably a mixture of both. I expect you to be gone when I return, she said tearfully, heading for the bathroom, where I noticed the large engagement ring on her finger as she wiped her eyes and left. You must be Bob Thomas Susak's husband, he asked with disdain in his voice. Yes, and you must be the new guy she's been dreaming about, I replied, feeling his irritation. I'm Sue's CFO, and if I were you, I'd avoid using that term, he warned, though his reluctance to make a scene was clear. I just wanted to talk to you in private. I have 3 questions. Then I'll be out of your life forever, I told him, noticing his puzzled expression. I've been in your position before, and I don't want anyone else to go through what I did. I guess she portrayed me as a bad husband, abusive, neglectful, or a cheater. I mentioned that I know exactly what she told him, but I'm not here to salvage my reputation with you. Frankly, I don't think it would make a difference. First of all, does Sarah still hold her Avon meetings at her house on Tuesdays and Thursdays? I asked Sue, who helped Sarah with her home decor sales on Mondays and Wednesdays. It seems your memory is a little off, he replied. Okay then. Does she still play tennis on Saturdays? I pushed Sue to play tennis on Sundays. You seem to forget a lot for someone who was married to her for so long, he said triumphantly. Okay, last question. Have you ever looked under the bottom drawer of the dresser in your living room? I quickly asked. No, why would I do that? He objected. The 3 questions I asked you are why we're not together anymore. I still have all the leftover divorce papers in my office, legal documents, emails from Sarah and the other woman, and hours of videotapes. I've been carrying them around with me for the last 3 years, so I thought you should have them, I explained, pulling a worn and folded piece of paper out of my wallet. This is what the other woman wrote to Sarah when she asked how she could get rid of me before I caught her cheating. After reading that letter, I realized I didn't really know her, and maybe I still don't, but it's all about you. I said I would give him the paper, but I knew Sue very well and understood her routines. She always followed the same habits meticulously, which sometimes drove me crazy, and I also had a feeling that even with a new man, she'd stick to her old ways. I explained that he seemed unsure about taking the paper, but curiosity seemed to win out. He reached over and opened the email. I've kept it with me for 3 years, rereading it from time to time and trying to improve myself so that no woman would ever say those things about me again. Of all the evidence, this email affected me the most, which is why I've kept it. It's the same email I mentioned earlier in my story. Peter read the letter slowly, and then quickly put it down on the table. He grabbed a pen, scribbled a note on it, and, to my surprise, abruptly left the restaurant. No look back, no thank you, nothing. His face remained blank. I leaned over to see what he had written on the old email. I'll be home soon. Wait, I'll call you in 15 minutes. I just need to look under the bottom drawer in my living room. Dresser, sir, back soon. Peter. I sensed he understood the truth, even if he wasn't thrilled that I seemed to have hit too close to home on all 3 issues. The email seemed to be the tipping point, and he had to confirm it himself by leaving a note on Sue's desk. I left. There was no way I was staying in that restaurant with anyone tonight. Back in the lobby, I called my client, who didn't mind rescheduling since they were already behind schedule. Before I left, I took another look at the table. Sue came back looking for Peter, who was sitting down. She noticed her old email and Peter's note underneath it. Her face turned pale as she recognized the contents of her old email and Peter's message. The last time I saw my wife, she was crying so hard that the whole restaurant turned to look at her. I felt a little sorry for her, but at the same time I was indifferent. That was our last meeting. I still wonder if Peter found something under the dresser drawer. Sue's tears suggested that he might have.